Morning, everyone. Now, I know you all agree with me that it's a great day to be in America, isn't it? All right, that's kind of a weak applause. Isn't it a great day to be in America? All right, thank you. I want to welcome all of you to the 80th anniversary of the Day of Valor, commemorating the battles of Bataan and Corregidor, or we call it in Tagalog, Araw ng Kagitingan. It's a commemoration and also a wreath-laying ceremony. This event is a natural observance celebrated throughout the United States and in the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand in honor of the United States and Philippine national colors and remain standing for the singing of the Philippine and U.S. national anthems by Mr. Alan Palacios Chan, Jr.
Colors, ready, punch. Colors, forward, march. Punch, 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 punch. Colors! Halt! Colors! Freeze! Set! Off!
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiil, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bugaw, may dilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal, ang kislap ng wataw at mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim, lupa ng araw ng luwalhatit pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo, aming ligaya na pagmay mga api ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Please take your seats. We have a large guest that is observing today. I am Major General Tony Taguba, United States Army retired, and Chairman of the Filipino Veterans Recognition and Education Project. On behalf of VFW Post 5471 and PhilVet Rep, I welcome you on this epic event to memorialize the 80th anniversary of the fall of Bataan on April 9, 1942, and Corregidor on May 6, 1942, respectively, during World War II in the Philippines. Bataan and Corregidor were not just battlefields. They are hallowed grounds where thousands of Filipinos and Americans, men and women alike, who fought to defend their homeland in the Philippines and for a country far, far away called the United States of America. The huge losses of lives in battle, in captivity, from hunger and disease and wounds were interminable. Those who survived Bataan and Corregidor fought courageously and fiercely for several more years to fight the enemy and finally won victory over Japan on September 2nd, 1945. Yesterday, on a somber and rainy morning, Lieutenant Celestino Almeida, a World War II veteran, was laid to rest at the Quantico National Cemetery. An extraordinary and inspirational man with a strong and steadfast passion to fight for justice, to gain benefits and compensation for him and his fellow veterans that were denied by the United States Congress in February of 1946, called the Rescission Acts. His incredible wisdom of life, or the story of his being, as Father George said at his requiem at gravesite yesterday, will be immortalized by his family, his friends, and our community. Mr. Celestino Almeida died at 100 years old. He will join his battle buddies, you might say, in heaven: Alberto Bacani, Patrick Gagno, Joaquin or Jack Tejeda, Jesse Baltazar, Ed Ramsey, Guillermo Rumingan, and many others. I can only imagine their spirit is hovering over us today as we celebrate this Day of Valor and Araw ng Kagitingan. Mr. Celestino Almeida fulfilled his duty to the country as a soldier and veteran on earth. I'm certain he will have a glorious reunion with his fellow veterans and maybe even meet my dad, Tomas Taguba, in heaven. We're especially honored to have present with us several distinguished guests. His Excellency Jose Manuel G. Romualdez, the Republic of the Philippines Ambassador to the United States. Let's give him a round of applause, please. Soon we will meet the Undersecretary of the Air Force, who is on her way, the Honorable Gina Ortiz Jones. Present with us is one of the few living veterans of World War II, Senior Chief Petty Officer Remigio, or he likes to be called Ray Cabacar, United States Navy retired, at a young age of 94 years old. His brother Heron Cabacar was twice a prisoner of war, first at the Bataan Death March and again during the Korean War. Also present is the Deputy Chief of Mission, Jaime Ramon Escalon. Welcome, sir, of the Philippine Embassy. And seated next to him is the Consul General of the Philippine Embassy, Eric Arribas. Thank you. We're delighted to have Brigadier General Roy McCalrig, United States Army representing the United States Armed Forces, Colonel Amado de la Paz, Defense and Air Force Attaché of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and with him is Captain Henry Quinto, Navy Attaché, Armed Forces of the Philippines. Our special guest could not be with us today, Ms. Holly Rotundi, the Executive Director for the Friends of National World War II Memorial. She emailed me last night due to her illness. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my distinct honor to present our distinguished speaker. Ambassador Romualdez was appointed Ambassador of the Philippines to the United States by Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte in July of 2017. He assumed his position as Philippine Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary to the United States in November 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to His Excellency Ambassador Jose Manuel Gallego Romualdez.
Thank you. Please sit down. Thank you, General Taguba, for your kind introduction. And welcome to all our friends here present in this very memorial occasion. It's always a pleasure for me to attend this ceremony because it really just gives us a reminder of the kind of relationship we have with the United States. And both our armed forces fought hand in hand in the battle for Bataan. Allow me to again acknowledge Major General Antonio Taguba, who is the chairman of the Filipino Veterans Recognition and Education Project, Brigadier General Roy Macaraig of the U.S. Army, Colonel Amado de la Paz, Philippine Defense and Armed Forces Attaché to the United States, Senior Chief Petty Officer First Class Rahimio Cabacar, the honored World War II veteran, distinguished guests from the Philippines and the United States military, our friends from the PhilVitrep and VFW Post 5471, fellow Filipinos, and our American friends. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank our constant and dedicated partners from the Filipino Veterans Recognition and Education Project and the veterans of the Filipino Wars of the United States, especially the VFW Post 5471 and VFW Auxiliary 5471 for organizing this very special program. I also would like to express my heartfelt appreciation to the Filipino World War II veterans and their families for being with us today. The Philippine Embassy, including our Defense and Armed Forces Attachés, or Affairs Office, is honored to commemorate this year's anniversary with the theme Kagitingan ng mga Veterano, Inspirasyon ng Nagkakaisang Pilipino, or the gallantry of the veterans, inspiration of the united Filipinos. This year, we underscore the courage and sacrifice and heroism of our veterans, which have inspired the younger generation of Filipinos and Filipino Americans and have molded them into honorable citizens who continue to strengthen our identity as one nation and people. Today, we once again commemorate the fall of Bataan and the mark of the 80th anniversary of our nation's Day of Valor, or Araw ng Kagitingan. We recall this momentous period in our nation's history and remember not only the agony of our defeat in the Bataan Peninsula, but more importantly, the valor of our veterans, their persistent and winning spirit despite the difficult odds which made us true victors in the end. Exactly 80 years ago, on April 9, 1942, the world witnessed the fall of Bataan. It marked the beginning of the horrible and infamous forced march of about 76 Filipino and American soldiers and prisoners of war, now known as the Bataan Death March. But it also sealed in blood the permanent ties of friendship and cooperation between the Philippines and the United States, and it truly made us brothers in blood and arms. The Battle of Bataan began on January 7, 1942, when the combined Filipino and American forces fought from the untenable position and endured despite the lack of air and naval support. Finally, on April 9, with the remaining forces or troops crippled by starvation and disease, the then U.S. USAF Commander Major General Edward King Jr. surrendered to the Japanese invaders. The surrendered Filipinos and Americans were soon rounded up and forced to march some 65 miles from Mariveles on the southern end of the Bataan Peninsula to San Fernando, Pampanga. This horrendous ordeal lasted between 5 and 12 days, depending on where a BOW started their journey along the route. Butchery, disease, exposure to unforgiving sun, lack of food, and the lack of water took the lives of thousands of Filipinos and Americans midway through. Some captives were beaten, while unfortunate ones were shot, bayoneted, left to die, and in many cases beheaded by their Japanese captors. Despite the grueling journey, thousands of Filipino and American captives endured and held their ground and survived their share of that heroic tale. From this perspective, I reiterate my appreciation for the sacrifices of our selfless comrades in arms, our honored veterans in their pursuit of victory. Please join me in extending a thunderous ovation to our heroes. It is their sacrifice that liberated us from one of the darkest moments of our nation's history, so that the succeeding generation may enjoy peace, freedom, and security. Their valor, boldness, and distinction are indeed worthy of our respect and admiration. The unparalleled sacrifices, dedication to duty, professionalism, and discipline that our veterans continue to provide in every opportunity of public service have withstood the test of time, and with that, this occasion is made even more significant. Let us all pay reverence to all our departed brothers in service who made the supreme sacrifice of giving us their lives while performing the honorable duty to our beloved country. They ultimately embodied the core values that have been the hallmark of the armed profession. Amidst our humble celebration, may I once again request our esteemed guests and all the veterans and servicemen present today to join me in a moment of silence as we remember and honor our fallen heroes, both Filipino and Americans alike, and their great self-sacrifice in their fight for our nation's freedom, independence, and democracy. Thank you. Before I end my speech, I'd like to acknowledge the arrival of our Undersecretary of U.S. Air Force, Ms. Gina Ortiz-Jones. Thank you very much for being here. Allow me to indulge myself as I address my fellow countrymen in our native tongue. 10 ng aking mga kasama sa embahada, pinupugay namin ang kagitingan ng ating mga veterano. Kayo ang bukal ng inspirasyon upang pagkakaisahan ang mga Pilipino. Mabuhay ang mga veterano at ang nagkakaisang Pilipino at Amerikano. Once again, to our Bataan defenders, we salute you. Long live the veterans and the united Filipino and American people. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas. God bless the United States and God bless the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your inspirational message to mark this epic day. Well, it's timely when someone from the Pentagon shows up to this memorial. And not to criticize, or I think we want to welcome her, actually, because she's half Filipino, at least that. And then, but we want to welcome, again, the Undersecretary of the United States Air Force, the entire United States Air Force, the Honorable Gina Ortiz-Jones. Please welcome her as she approaches the podium and make remarks. Thank you.
Well, I apologize for showing up on Filipino time. True mestiza. Mr. Ambassador, thank you, Tony, and to the entire group that arranged this event, and certainly to our esteemed veterans and currently serving. It's truly an honor to stand before you And as I also look upon my sister, who is serving at the VA and in charge of all women's veterans services there. So thank you so much for what you do. Again, it's truly an honor to be here when we reflect on 80 years since so many, in the face of torture, but in the name of democracy, endured the Bataan Death March. And the bonds that continue to exist between our country are ones that are strong and will need to be strong, continuing when we look at our collective challenges moving forward. But I want to again just thank you for continuing to memorialize this important event, something that we will never forget and can never underestimate the power, the strength of the inspiration of certainly hope and of democracy, which folks knew the Bataan Death March was about, right? What could sustain somebody to have to march that and to endure that torture? Again, it's the promise of democracy, the promise of a better day, and that was afforded and only realized through the strength, the common strength of those who endured. So thank you again for coming today. Truly an honor to spend some time with you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your remarks, and thank you for coming. We truly are so fortunate to have you today. Our next guest speaker, you might say he's a celebrity of sort, and is one of our remaining living veterans of World War II. Senior Chief Petty Officer Remigio or Ray Cabakar enlisted in the United States Navy on April 2nd, 1945, after walking for some 32 miles from his hometown in the Philippines to the naval station at Subic Bay. His wartime service during World War II also included the Korean War. He served on numerous naval combat vessels, to include the USS Belgrove, while he witnessed the hydrogen bomb test at Bikini Atoll in the Pacific. As you can see, he's still alive with us today. He received numerous commendations and service awards during his time in the Navy, and retiring as a Senior Chief Petty Officer in 1969 after 24 years. Not to be settled at home, he continued his public service for another 20 years as chef for the FBI directors Patrick Gray, Clarence Kelly, William Webster, and William Sessions. He's an active community servant supporting veterans programs with the Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 5471 and throughout the Filipino-American community in Maryland and Virginia. He and his wife, she's sitting right behind him, of 67 years, have 4 children. 2 of their daughters are with us today. 10 grandchildren. Of course, they could not attend to see their lolo because they're in school. And numerous great-grandchildren. So ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome Senior Chief Petty Officer Ray Cabakar, United States Navy, retired.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mr. Ambassador, Under Secretary of the Air Force, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to express my sincere respect and esteem. Today, we gather to remember those who fought, surrendered, and were participants in one of the darkest chapters of World War II. Today, we commemorate the 80th year anniversary of the Bataan Death March. In December 1941, Japanese forces began their assault on Manila Bay. The battle raged for months and eventually running short of food, fighting disease and dehydration. It looked helpless. Men, were dying by the thousands, by the hundreds. And in April 1942, the Allied forces surrendered. Over 76,000 malnourished U.S. and Filipino soldiers surrendered and were taken prisoner. In the March of Death began, the Japanese led these prisoners on a forced march of 60 miles to move these prisoners to a prison camp. Many of the prisoners were battle-worn and incapable of keeping up the grueling pace of the march, especially the tropical heat and with little water. Over 10,000 American and Filipino soldiers perished on that march. Many more passed away in the camp over the years. In 1943, Filipino prisoners were released when Japan installed the puppet government of Jose Laurel. In 1944, General Douglas MacArthur fulfilled his promise to return and completed the restoration of the Philippines as a free nation. Remembering this day is necessary and very personal. You see, my old brother Hiren walked the death march and survived prison camps. Let us always remember the brave soldiers who participated in the Bataan March and in any war give their all so that we have the freedoms that we enjoy as Americans. Thank you for coming and participating this day. God bless us all and God bless America. Thank you very much.
Thank you, man, and great. You know, as always, you always come prepared with your remarks. You know, I don't know how he does it, but as you can say, he's very lucid and he's also very articulate. So now we'll go with the ceremony. Let's assemble the wreath laying party. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the playing of taps. and gentlemen, please take your seats. Wreath laying party, please return to your seats. I now introduce Brigadier General Roy J. McCurrig, United States Army. He currently serves as Assistant for Army National Guard Personnel and Talent Management. He enlisted in the Army National Guard as a private in 1990 and has risen to his rank of Brigadier General in 2017. He is one of the very few Filipino Americans in the Army today who achieved the rank of General Officer. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General McCurrig.
What a beautiful day. Ambassador Romulo, Senior Chief Petty Officer Habakar Ray, Mr. Escalon, Colonel De La Paz, Captain Quinto, Ms. Rotonde, Undersecretary Ortiz, General Taguba, distinguished guests, families and friends, good morning. Good morning. It's a beautiful morning. What could be better to be here at the World War II Memorial? First, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to be here. I would like to thank the veterans of Foreign Wars Post 5471 of Maryland and the Filipino Veterans Recognition and Education Project of Virginia for the invitation and the opportunity to speak today. As a Filipino-American general currently serving in the United States Army, it is a great honor and absolute pleasure to be here. Today, we commemorate and remember the 80th anniversary of the fall of Bataan and Corregidor in honor of the American and Filipino World War II veterans and their families. It is a day of service and remembrance. It is truly a blessing to be here among these veterans and their families. 80 years ago, American and Filipino soldiers fiercely fought side by side against the forces of Imperial Japan. More than 260,000 Filipinos answered President Roosevelt's call to duty during World War II. Filipino soldiers fought bravely and served alongside American soldiers under the Stars and Stripes. American Filipino veterans of World War II of the United States and Philippines share common values: honor, selfless service, patriotism on their duty to country. And we must always remember and recognize their faithful service and sacrifices. Less than 24 hours after the Japanese Empire attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the Japanese Imperial forces launched a coordinated attack on the Philippines. American and Filipino soldiers of the U.S. Armed Forces of the Far East, under command of General Douglas MacArthur, fought bravely against great, overwhelming Japanese force. The Japanese estimated to subdue the Philippines in days, but the American and Filipino forces relentlessly defended the Philippines and made a valiant defensive stand in Bataan and the island of Corregidor for more than 4 months, until the American and Filipino forces, with extremely low supplies and ammunition, were left with no means to continue to resist. So 80 years ago, after the fall of Bataan and Corregidor, 66,000 Filipinos 12,000 American soldiers were forced to march 70 miles under extreme, brutal conditions, in tropical heat, with no food and water. They marched for days. Those who could not continue were killed by the Japanese soldiers. More than 700 Americans and approximately 10,000 Filipinos died during the march. One of the most tragic, atrocious events in World War II, the Bataan Death March. You know, over the years, I attended many of these memorials and commemoration. Events like this, it is very clear that our World War II veterans, the greatest generation, continue to dwindle in alarming numbers. We are truly losing our national treasures at a very high rate. Memorials and commemorations like this are very important to give us the opportunity to thank them for their service, to continue to remember their sacrifices, and to perpetuate their legacy. Today, we are doing just that. We are commemorating and remembering the sacrifices of an extraordinary group of American and Filipino veterans, a member of the greatest generation, the Filipino-American soldiers who served during World War II, who demonstrated complete, unconditional patriotism. Today, we give our sincere appreciation and remember their sacrifices, for it was them who have paved the way and provided opportunities for so many, for future generations. The Filipino-American soldiers of World War II consistently demonstrated unwavering commitment and resolve, selfless service, devotion to country in the face of adversity. We can only endeavor to attempt to never forget their sacrifices and their unconditional patriotism. I am truly humbled by this remarkable opportunity to speak here today. And again, I want to thank the veterans of foreign wars, Post 5471 of Maryland, the Filipino Veterans Recognition Education Project of Virginia, and special thank you to Major General Taguba, our MC, whose father is also a World War II veteran, exceptional leader. He has been instrumental in honoring and recognizing the services and legacy of the Filipino World War II veterans. Most of all, I want to thank the veterans here today. And I want to especially thank Senior Chief Petty Officer Kabakar Ray for his service and sacrifice. It is truly humbling to be here with you. And with great respect, I salute you. Marami pong salamat sa inyong lahat. God bless all of you. God bless the Philippines. And God bless America. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, General Roy Carreg, for your historic message and why we are assembled here this morning. We look forward to your future promotion somewhere and the big party that you're going to provide for this great audience, right?
We hope so.
We hope. Okay. You're all invited, by the way, so I'll be hosting. We are delighted to have Colonel Amaro de la Paz, the Defense an Air Force attaché deliver a message on behalf of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. He occupies a high position as Defense and Air Force attaché, representing the national defense of the Philippines as a trusted and respected military official. At the behest of the Philippine Secretary of National Defense and President of the Philippines, Duterte. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Colonel De La Paz.
His Excellency Ambassador Manuel D.G. Romulo, sir. Undersecretary Gina Ortiz-Jones. Major General Antonio Taguba, sir. DCM Jaime Ramon Escalon, sir. Junior. Congen Iric Arribas, sir. Brigadier General Roy Macaraig, sir. And Senior Petty Officer First Class Remigio Cabacar, or Sir Ray. Our partners from the Filipino Veterans Recognition and Education Project, or PhilVetrep, the veterans of foreign wars of the United States, especially those from the General Douglas MacArthur, PFW Post 5471, our embassy personnel, our families and friends, our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the Department of National Defense and the Armed Forces of the Philippines, I would like to thank all of you for taking the time out to attend this activity. To the organizers, headed by our Major General Antonio Taguba, thank you for your continuous support of this significant program, which commemorates the heroism of both the U.S. and the Philippine troops during the Bataan Death March. Our appreciation also goes to His Excellency Jose Manuel D.G. Romulo, sir, for his continuous support of this activity. As we celebrate the Day of Valor, or Araw ng Kagitingan, we honor and remind ourselves of the acts of courage and heroism demonstrated by thousands of Filipinos and American soldiers during the Second World War. Today marks the 80th anniversary of the Bataan Death March, whereby its significance is visibly felt, seen, and remembered in our history. We commemorate the courage and heroism shown by our soldiers in the face of overwhelming odds and struggles. It is a day of celebrating our unsung heroes and the surviving veterans, along with the continuing heroism and lessons passed on to generations. It is also a day that highlighted the strong ties between the Philippines and the United States. The combined forces, with the given support and cooperation of both countries, fostered brotherhood that was sustained all through the years. As we may have heard time and time again, history does not end at our past or at the now. Araw ng Kagitingan reminds us that our valor cannot only be exhibited in the face of defense and battlefields. The act of valor is within us all. We live by and through it in our everyday lives, within our nation, and amongst ourselves. The call to valor is for every Filipino to hold on to its virtues in all of our endeavors and what we must do to protect and defend our peace and democracy in times of struggles and threats. We do not only commemorate our fallen soldiers in the fall of Bataan, but we also celebrate our modern-day heroes in our war against COVID-19 pandemic. Our frontliners who risk their lives every day to provide for their families and to help our fellow people. Let us honor this day as an opportunity for Filipinos today and tomorrow to remember moments of our past of strength and courage, and to call upon them once more if need be. Thank you to all our heroes of today and all of our heroes in the past. Commemorating and celebrating the events in our history is essential to our nation building and recovery. Once again, thank you all for being here with us today.
Thank you, Colonel De La Paz and the Armed Forces of the Philippines. And before we close, I want to personally thank Ambassador Romulo, sir, and Undersecretary of the entire Air Force, Gina Ortiz Jones, for their busy schedule and having to attend our event today. I also want to acknowledge Mr. James Albino, the Director of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs Center for Minority Veterans, to Ms. Lourdes Diglau, the Executive Director, Center for Women Veterans at VA, Veterans Affairs, Mr. Seth Watkins, Esquire Extraordinaire, Mr. Ron Zagudan, staff member of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs VA Center for Minority Veterans, Colonel and Mrs. Stoy, and Mrs. Stoy's mom, Jesus Che. Where are you? Over there. You're hidden. Here she is. Let's give her a round of applause. She's been a mainstay of our ceremonies every year. To Mr. Al Goshi, past president of the Japanese American Veterans Association, is in the back there somewhere. And to the families of veterans, the PhilVetra board members, and members of VFW 5471, thank you for organizing this ceremony. And thank you all, our tourists and our guests that's joined us today for attending our ceremonies. And please, 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 wherever you go, please stay safe over the weekend and everywhere, and take care of yourself and take care of each other. Again, thank you for attending the ceremony. You may now take a lot of photos with our dignitaries. I'd like, because I know you want to do that and make it posted on Facebook somewhere along the line. But again, just be organized and respectful. No grabbing. All right. That ends our ceremony. Again, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You may now be seated. I hope you enjoyed the lunch, especially prepared by our PhilVetra partners. To begin today's reception, I would like to call on Deputy Chief of Mission, Jaime Ramon Ascalon Jr., to deliver the introductory remarks.
Distinguished guests, mga kababayan, good afternoon, and welcome to the embassy and to the second, or rather the third part of our commemoration of the 80th Day of Valor, or Araw ng Kagitingan, in honor of all our Filipino veterans. You will all agree that we had a solemn and inspiring ceremony earlier today at the World War II Memorial. Thank you again to the members of the organizing committee for ensuring our successful commemoration this morning. I wish to echo the introduction of General Taguba this morning. Today is a great day. It is indeed a great day to honor Filipinos and American soldiers who showed unparalleled valor and heroism 80 years ago. Among those brave Filipinos was Carlos P. Romulo. And today, we remember his achievements and sacrifices for the Filipino nation. Before he became a seasoned diplomat and the Philippine Secretary of Foreign Affairs, he helped lead the joint forces towards the Philippine independence during the Second World War as Brigadier General in the Philippine Army and as Chief Aide to General Douglas MacArthur. He also won a Pulitzer Prize for Peace for his pre-war evaluation of the military situation in the Pacific area. His military accomplishments alone already brought great honor to the country. Thus, the embassy significantly appreciates this opportunity to receive and unveil a donated portrait of Carlos P. Romulo from the U.S. Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 5471 here in our very own Romulo Hall. As we celebrate Araw ng Kagitingan, may we be reminded of the courage and patriotism of our veterans that serve as powerful symbols of the Filipinos' indomitable spirit in times of adversities. Maraming salamat and mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you, DCI. Next up is a person who needs no introduction. He's an inspiring hero and our very own World War II veteran. I have the honor to call Manong Ray Cabakar to deliver his message.
He can march. Just stand behind.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are not tired looking at me. Can you see me though?
Yes.
In blood and heart, I am a Filipino, but in thought and deed, I am an American. I was born under the American flag. When I started school in the Philippines, as a young child, the Star-Spangled Banner was sung and the Pledge of Allegiance was recited. I served in the U.S. Navy for 25 years and I am a World War II veteran. Human tragedy breaks our hearts and it strengthens our resolve to do all we can to avoid future tragedy. And tragedy uniquely draws us together as humans to comfort and remember. That's why we are here today. The Day of Valor o Araw ng Kagitingan commemorates the heroism of Filipinos and American soldiers when the Japanese occupied the Philippines during World War II. The Bataan Death March was one of the most well-known tragedies that period. On April 9, 1942, after a valiant effort to repel the Japanese invasion of the Philippines, Major General Edward King of the U.S. Army was forced to surrender to an overwhelming Japanese invasion force. 76,000 Filipino and American soldiers were taken prisoners and forced to march over 60 miles across the Bataan Peninsula to an internment in Camp O'Donnell in the scorching heat without food or water. In that 10-day march, as many as 10,000 soldiers died. Within months after, it is estimated another 30,000 died. We are here to commemorate and remember the heroes of World War II. Let us allow this day of remembrance spur us to action in two ways. First, let us resolve to live a life of service. In Bataan and Corregidor, thousands of Filipino and American soldiers suffered greatly for a greater good. They fought for the ideals of a country and to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Those who fought for freedom in Bataan and Corregidor were willing to lay their lives on the line, paying the ultimate cost for the freedoms of Filipino people, the American people, and the allied nations as a whole. The same struggle continues today. We still fight for freedom and liberty from oppression in many areas of our world. We must remember the importance of sacrifice. Our military serving across the globe strives to protect those who cannot protect themselves from oppression. For those who are currently serving on active duty in the military or have served in the past, a heartfelt thank you from myself as well as on behalf of a great nation. Number 2, let us draw together for a greater good. Winston Churchill once said, "Those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it." It is easy and natural to resent those who cause suffering and allow that resentment to grow and shape our lives. In any armed conflict, atrocities occur. Men and women pressed to the limits of endurance often act in ways that are unthinkable in the 2020 eyes of history. The sufferings of those who walked the Bataan death march are unimaginable, and the behavior of the oppressors can seem unforgivable. In 2009, the ambassador of Japan met with 73 remaining survivors of the death march and formally apologized for the atrocities committed in World War II, and the survivors were forgiven. More than 75 years later, we must daily remember not to hold grudges against the oppressors and honor the sacrifices of our forebears. The ideals of democracy are meant to enable a society where all live in unity, respecting our differences and building a better society. We cannot and should not forget the sufferings of those who sacrifice, but we must also understand that time does heal wounds and that the sacrifice of these World War II heroes was meant to unite and protect our world. We have forgiven but not forgotten. So, as we Americans and Filipinos are gathered here in the Embassy of the Philippines today, let us remember the sacrifices of those who have gone before us. There is no one better to remember today that I know than remembering the life and service of an accomplished soldier and renowned diplomat, one who served valiantly as a soldier and after his military career pursued further as a government servant. As a major, served as a one-time aide to General Douglas MacArthur. He was one of the last men evacuated from the Philippines before the surrender of U.S. forces to the Japanese. After World War II, his diplomatic career took him to a newfound heights. He served 8 Philippine presidents, became the ambassador of the Philippines to the United States, and served the United Nations as President of United Nations General Assembly and President of the United Nations Security Council. But one less known fact that I am proud of is the fact that he was one of the founding members of Veterans of Foreign War Post 5471. My post in Action Hill, Maryland. You see, in 1945, 12 U.S. AFE soldiers led by Carlos P. Romulo banded together in Washington, D.C. to form VFW Post 5471. The post has been around since then, not only to serve veterans and the community, but also to continue and preserve the legacy of Filipino-American soldiers who served during World War II. And so, ladies and gentlemen, as I close, on behalf of my family and the veterans of foreign wars, Post 5471, I would like to donate a portrait of Honorable Carlos P. Romulo to the Embassy of the Republic of the Philippines. May God bless America, land of the free. May God bless the Philippines, pearl of the Orient. May God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Manong. May I now ask Manong Ray to remain in front, and for Ambassador Romualdez, Major General Taguba, Brigadier General Macaraeg, and Mrs. Mary Lagman to join him in front for the official unveiling of the portrait.
Mr. Ambassador, General Taguba, or General Macaraeg, this is Lagman. On my count, on 3, please unveil the portrait of Carlos P. Romulo. A la una, a las dos, a las tres.
Well, first and foremost, let me thank again Senior Chief Petty Officer First Class Review Abakar and his family for their kind generosity in donating this portrait of General Carlos P. Romulo here at this very famous hall now called the Romulo Hall. You know, when I was a news reporter many years ago, I used to spend a lot of time in the Foreign Affairs Secretary's office because I was covering the Foreign Affairs Department. And at that time, it was Secretary Carlos P. Romulo. So I had the privilege and honor of getting to know him a little much better than most of my peers. And he had such a great sense of humor. And one of them was, which was said to him on many occasions because of that famous photo when they came down to land in Leyte. And they said that General Romulo was so short that the water was almost drowning him. But when they told that joke to him again in one occasion, and I happened to be there, I'll never forget that very famous wit of his when he says, "I was a dime among nickels." And indeed, he was a dime. Not only a dime, but he was a giant. And you, sir, are also a giant for being here today and honoring us and donating this famous portrait. I'm very pleased and honored, 16 ambassadors later to have succeeded General Carlos P. Romulo, who was one of my idols when I was young and up to this day. Perhaps the greatest testament to a man's humanity is the grateful recognition of his noble deeds and aspirations. This becomes even more priceless when he opts to remain incognizant into the loftiness of his generosity. This is what epitomizes our big-hearted kababayan and kind benefactor, Ray Kabakar. This donation indeed came as a surprise, as we thought that we could just gather here today for a reception and reconnect with old friends and kababayans as we commemorate the 80th Araw ng Kagitingan. It is therefore a welcome surprise that we are given this opportunity to accept an artistic representation of our nation's most distinguished soldier, diplomat, and prominent veteran, Carlos P. Romulo. It is no coincidence that this hall is named after him. He was not only a soldier diplomat, but also an educator, a journalist, a prominent author, and more importantly, a national artist for literature. This portrait will undoubtedly serve as a centerpiece and welcome addition to the Romulo Hall here at the Embassy. And so on behalf of the Philippine Embassy and the Philippine government, I thank you for trusting us with this portrait, which we will certainly treasure. Ray, you have truly made the 80th anniversary of Araw ng Kagitingan an unforgettable milestone celebration. I wish you more blessings and happiness. Maraming salamat po.
Just as Manong Ray has surprised the embassy, we also have our surprise for Manong Ray. May we ask the ambassador and Manong Ray to proceed in front as we present a plaque of appreciation for Manong Ray.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Embassy of the Republic of the Philippines awards this plaque of recognition to Senior Chief Petty Officer Remigio Kabakar, United States Navy, retired, in recognition of his leadership and tireless contributions, especially in the campaign for the Filipino Veterans Congressional Gold Medal and the naming of a U.S. Navy warship after Telesforo Trinidad through Veterans of Foreign Wars VFW 5471, and in building a stronger relationship between Filipino Americans and the Embassy of the Philippines, given on this 8th day of April 2022 at the Embassy of the Republic of the Philippines, Washington, D.C., signed Jose Manuel J. Romualdez, Ambassador of the Philippines to the United States of America.